Welcome to the Ed Leaders Edge podcast, where we interview innovators and thought leaders in the field of education who are helping students thrive. I'm your host, Ed Madison. I'm a professor and researcher at the University of Oregon, an educational consultant, and serve as executive director of the Journalistic Learning Initiative, a nonprofit organization that empowers elementary, middle, and high school students to discover their voice, improve academic outcomes, and become self-directed learners through project-based storytelling. Welcome to our program.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. Mike Beighley is the superintendent of schools for the Whitehall School District in Whitehall, Wisconsin. It's a small school district taking on very big initiatives, including an emerging technology center that exposes students to 3D printing, drones, autonomous vehicles, and robotics. Welcome, Mike. When we had talked previously, you mentioned that you actually had traveled through Europe in researching, sort of developing this center. Tell me about it.
Well, we have a tremendous partnership here with the Whitehall School District and the folks at Ashley Furniture, the Wanek family, the Ron and Joyce Wanek Foundation. And those folks, based on, I think, some curiosity that we had and some awareness that we had, were generous enough to take me all over the country. We spent 11 days in Germany, looking at different educational approaches, different schools, different institutions at every level, both K-12 and post-secondary, and then I believe 80 to 90 different visits throughout the U.S. Again, just trying to find best practices, to borrow pieces of each of those things and try to create what should be a futuristic model.
Well, let's distill that a little bit, because you gathered a lot of information that I think a lot of people in your position would benefit from. What did you see that surprised you? What did you see that you thought was valuable enough to bring home?
I think the biggest thing that we needed to be able to understand it's not an epiphany, right? It's that we have to continue to change, and we have to figure out a way to match the individual needs of our kids with what the future is going to require. You know, certainly that's some things we saw. We traveled to Florida Atlantic University, some things down there, watched kids at Henderson, I believe was the name of the school, really do some creative things, changing the environment for kids, start fostering and identifying what those individual strengths were. And I think it doesn't take long to figure out our traditional role or our traditional method of educating kids was meant for a different time. You know, and I think the other thing that struck me as we went through is how this phrasing of schools are broken or schools are somehow not functioning well, I think it was a misnomer. I think that was something else that was powerful, is schools aren't broken. They perform exceptionally well. The world has changed and the expectations have changed, and we need to do a better job of identifying those individual strengths and in creativity, putting that back into what we do here. And I think that's the main takeaways that we had, that we weren't necessarily broken. The world has just changed and our targets changed and we haven't been able to modify. And now I think if we can blend some of the technology on the emerging side that's coming or here already, now we might be able to hit those individual needs and do a much better job of preparing kids for the future that they're going to live in as opposed to the past that we all grew up in.
Mm-hmm. You know, we also are always hearing about schools in Finland and other places throughout Europe that are supposed to be superior to our schools, and I'm just curious, just to dive a little bit even deeper into what you observed, because you did visit a significant amount of schools here in the U.S. Is it pretty much what you're saying? Is it really kind of paying attention to more of the individual needs and attention that's the distinguishing factor that makes a difference, you think? Or
I think so. I think, again, we need to keep in mind what our outcomes are. If we're expected to create folks for Industry 2.0 and Industry 3.0, or we're going to work in factories in a setting like that, we got tremendous results for a long time. And we were the envy of the world. I think now as we become globalized and we become truly a world market, we need to understand that we need to be creative again. We need to explore human development. And quite frankly, you look at some of the demographics that we're seeing with declining birth rates and increasing age discrepancies throughout our country. We need to maximize the human capacity of every kid as opposed to stratifying and identifying those kids that don't fit a certain predetermined objective, and then we don't necessarily spend all the time and energy on those kids. And I think that's been a flaw for a long time.
So give us an idea, if we were to walk into the center there, the emerging center, what would we see? What's a day like there for students?
One of the approaches that we've taken over there is all of the equipment that we added, again, with the help of the Ron and Joyce Wannick Foundation, is really geared at independent learning, individualized learning. You have multiple classes going on at one time. We have 2 instructors in this lab. Again, you mentioned some of the technology. We have drones, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, Industry 4.0, automation type things, Vex robotics. We teach 3D modeling, 3D scanning, 3D printing, all those different concepts. So you would see multiple kids in different classes throughout the day. Our instructors are truly mentoring in working with those kids based on their needs. We've removed a lot of the artificial limits. So we're really focused on human capacity and how fast and how far can kids go while mastering concepts as opposed to minimal compliance or however else we want to phrase that. But that might be one of the biggest mind shifts is we've embarked on a journey to get away from this whole concept of minimal compliance to hit some predetermined grade band and really start focusing on maximizing human potential through mastery. So I think all those things would be in play, but it would look a little chaotic for those traditionalists that want to see teacher-led instruction. Certainly we do some of that. I don't think I touch base on the fact that we have computer science taking place over there. I think soon to come into quantum computing type concepts, although those scenarios are at play. So you might see 50 kids over there or 60 kids over there taking 6 or 7 different classes at any one time, and then also learning from each other, teaching one another, having to coexist in a space where you're not necessarily on the same target as everybody else. So I think that environment itself is exciting.
Yeah, learning from one another used to be called cheating. Is actually a 12th grade or a 12-year-old student said that when I interviewed him once.
Right.
Because in the journalistic approach to teaching, it's a lot about collaboration and just pitching your ideas and those kinds of things. I am curious. I also saw on your website you're at the forefront of embracing AI. Tell me about that.
Let's step away from our conversation for a moment for me to tell you about the Journalistic Learning Initiative's innovative educational tools and services. If you're looking to make the best decision for your teaching staff and students about AI adoption, improving student engagement, strengthening writing skills, promoting social media mindfulness, or enhancing college and career readiness, please take a moment to visit our website at journalisticlearning.org. Our team of University of Oregon researchers offer customized AI tools, instructional materials, professional development, and consulting. Research confirms that students with journalistic learning experience outperform their peers on numerous key indicators for college and career readiness. At the heart of our work is empowering learners to become effective communicators. If you think about it, effective communication is critical in every human interaction, whether it's writing an essay for a grade or being interviewed to secure employment. Since 2015, JLI has benefited nearly 20,000 students and served schools in 15 states and the District of Columbia. I invite you to schedule an appointment to explore how JLI can improve your students' learning outcomes. Now back to our program.
I think we're embracing emerging technologies. Certainly artificial intelligence is one of them. We're intrigued by where augmented reality, virtual reality type things can go blended with AI. But I think what we're really targeting is how do we automate the certain processes of education that should be, right? We understand that there are large degrees of differentiation that need to take place in each of our classrooms. So I think we're trying to figure out how do we leverage the technology, but also then in essence, double down on the human side of things. How do we really mentor kids and focus on their strengths, their desires? What adds value to the world? What does the world need? All those types of concepts. So we're doing some pilot work right now with our 8th grade math program, seeing some tremendous results. Started those kids all on 8th grade math, but we're using an independent tool tied back to our existing curriculum. And we have some kids that are 6 weeks in and already have completed and been validated in all of their 8th grade math. So they're moving
Wow.
forward. Now we start to, and of that 80% of the kids in that classroom are ahead of schedule. So a normal pace of what our instructor is showing, and we're talking about a 30-year instructor with regular ed and special ed background, and validating each step of the way herself as well as what the tool tells us. So I think we're starting to see how much we have artificially but well-intentioned limited our kids. I think we're starting to see that limitation of teacher-led, teacher-driven instruction that is, again, artificially limiting kids. So I think that's become our target on the overall K-12 side, with an early on and a lofty target of applying that throughout our district for next fall.
Now tell me how the students are responding to this approach, and also the parents, because I think often parents expect school to be kind of like what it was when they were, they may not understand the sort of newfangled approaches.
Well, I think we're blessed here, Ed, with a tremendously supportive community. Certainly, we got together. We invited the parents in to see what this approach would look like. But I think when you start talking about maximizing the capacity of their child in a manner that works for them, supporting the kids on what they need, and also giving them the ability to move forward, pretty hard to argue with that. I think the student engagement has been really good. One of the observations that was shared with me is all of a sudden kids are talking about math. When they're just talking, they're actually talking about math. They're not necessarily doing some of the stuff that middle school kids would normally do, right?
Yeah.
So I think overall the engagement's been really good. I think the kids like to be in charge of their own learning, but I also will tell you that we do extensive work, and certainly this teacher in particular does extensive work with her learning environment as well. It's not a free-for-all. There's certainly there are still expectations for behavior. There are expectations for culture, how kids treat one another. But I think the real power is this approach is allowing her to focus on those things. It's not an afterthought when we have time. Mm-hmm. It's being able to really build that environment and that lifelong learning capacity in each of the kids, I think, is going to be the big dividend at the end.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing from a number of superintendents that, post-COVID, some of the younger kids who were coming into school, sort of because they missed some of the introduction to social cues and, the way in which we line up to move to recess and those kinds of things, and that's become somewhat of a challenge that will get them through, I guess. But I'm just curious to your observations about that.
I would agree completely. I think, certainly a lot of those structures and things that we've had in place for years, we're going to have to go back and intentionally reteach, along with a lot of society, right? We're seeing it everywhere, not just necessarily in school. But I think, how do we free our educators up, which arguably are our most well-informed in human development folks in our communities, especially our small rural communities? How do we free those folks up to work on those very things when right now we're tasking them with providing all of the content knowledge and background for these kids as well? I think we want to be able to leverage the tools once they become available. And again, right now, I think that a lot of them are in developmental stage. We're certainly hearing more about gamification concepts in education, and I've not seen anything personally that's quite ready yet. So we're using the tools that are out there. But I think you're right. I think, we see a lot of those structures and stability creating scenarios that are gone right now, and we have to rebuild them. So we have to allocate time somehow. And to me, this is a really good solution for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to botch the pronunciation of the valley. Is it Trempealeau?
Trempealeau, yep. Trempealeau Valley Cooperative,
Trempealeau.
Yep.
Yeah, so you have a consortium with other schools, and I gather with your strength in technology, maybe if a kid says, hey, I'm really more artistic, and I'm, that there may be classes that they can take elsewhere. Is that how it works, or am I misinterpreting?
It is. No, we are partnered with 3 other school districts, the Arcadia School District, Blair Taylor, and Independence as well. And we move kids between the 4 of us all day. We really look at maximizing what's available. One of our targets with the co-op, which was, quite frankly, a rebuild of a co-op from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. that we rebooted in 2017 with the idea that we knew we couldn't offer globally competitive environments in each of our small rural schools, but together we might be able to do a better job. So we do, if kids need classes, it allows specialization, right? It's not an efficient model if all four of us try to build a regional emerging technology lab, right? That's just not a good use of resources when we need one. So I think each of the districts has figured out what their strengths are, and we're working to figure out how those match the future, and then really maximize what's available to kids. But yeah, we have staff that travel, we have kids that travel. We also leverage the remote technology when it's appropriate. So we're really trying to give our kids the best of all worlds right now.
Your students, your high schoolers, can also earn college credit while in high school.
Yep, we have a tremendous number of college credits. We have some really good partners in this area. Our technical colleges with Western and Chippewa Valley are exceptional to work with. Was just yesterday up at a meeting with Western Technical College and University of Wisconsin Stout, working on pathway programs, using a new approach, which is the SACA certifications. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but Smart Automation Certification Alliance has created competencies that lead to certifications, and Western has partnered with UW Stout now to provide 80 plus credits for a 4-year degree, all coming from competency-based certifications. That's significant. That's a game changer, and a lot of which could be earned in high school. So now we're starting to unleash the human capacity and not requiring kids to be in school till they're 22 or 23 until they can add value to our economy and the workforce. So I think all of those are different targets, but we have some tremendous partners. And really try to offer our kids a true globally competitive environment. We're not there yet. Certainly we have lots of work to do, but we're working together to try to cooperate and do those things when we should be competing. So that flies directly in the face of what most do.
Yeah, I would encourage you to ask the foundation for some funds to basically create a documentary about what you're doing. I don't know if there's a school in the California area. It's called High Tech High, and it's people point to it as a in the same way I know that more people who learn about your program will point to your program as just where we ought to be looking and what we ought to be doing. Let me just ask you in parting here about just the whole area of public education. I think that with the varying debates about charter schools and everything else, what we're seeing in some communities, particularly large communities, is a depletion of budget dollars because parents are taking their kids elsewhere. So it's sort of dampening the experience for the kids that are still in public education. And I think there's just this sort of maybe pervasive narrative that that public schools in general in our country, as we talked about at the beginning, aren't doing a good job. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how we shift that, and have exemplars like yourself, but how do we shift that perception publicly? Because it's causing us to lose great teachers too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe as simple as it sounds is folks don't know what they don't know, right? We need to be able to share specifics that folks are aware of. We've done a lot of work right now looking at demographic projections coming out, and when we have more grandparents than grandchildren in the country for the first time ever, that's significant, right? We need to be aware of that. What happens if we don't provide high quality futuristic education for every one of our kids? We can't survive. We certainly can't thrive. I think when you start talking like that is more reason why we need the public education world to move forward, right? We need to move forward. Part of this whole defunding and lack of belief in our ability, I think, comes from the fact that we've been so resistant to change. But it really isn't a bad intent, right? We don't know what we don't know. So I think, again, and I wouldn't know it either, quite frankly, if not for the Waniks and the foundation and the folks at Ashley. So certainly one of the things we've done a few speaking engagements. One of the things I've encouraged is any business partners that are out there, take school folks with you when you travel. We aren't able to do that, right? Part of the whole funding mechanism, all that kind of stuff. We can't do that. So, or we need to share things with folks like yourself. And so I really appreciate the opportunity. But I think that whole concept, we just can't assume folks don't know.
Right.
All right. We have to assume and figure out the best, but we do have to educate every one of our kids to their maximum capacity, or we're going to be in real trouble as a society.
Thank you, Mike. Just let people know where they can find your school on the internet, URL or.
Yep. Our website is whitehallsd.k12.wi.us. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter as well. And otherwise, folks can reach out through that website to me personally, and we'll be happy to share anything we can.
Terrific. Thank you so much, sir.
The Ed Leader's Edge podcast is produced by the Journalistic Learning Initiative. Please check out our latest books, Language Arts in Action from W.W. Norton Publishing, and Raising Empowered Learners from Rauman and Littlefield. For more information about our work, please visit journalisticlearning.org or edleaderedge.org. Thanks for listening.